want to wish everyone a happy Saturday. Today is September 15th, and I am pleased to welcome back to the show, it's been a while, Zach Haller. How are you, Zach?
Hey, I'm good, Jason. How are you?
I'm very well. It's good to see you again, my friend. We know you've got experience with elections, and despite having a full-time job, you are a citizen journalist to the extent that you are writing regular columns on medium.com. And certainly, before we get underway with our discussion today, I do want to suggest that people go over to medium.com and follow you there. You're writing some great stories, of course, and the author of Catch-22 was Joseph Heller, but of course, you have written an article about the Catch-22s of Trump-Russia collusion and why the media ignores them. This is a particularly important story, and although so many of the concepts that you have based it on are things that I myself and many of the guests and viewers on Crowdsource The Truth agree with, you've raised some points that I haven't seen anywhere else, and I thought it would be good for you and I to sort of just go through this article and you to take everybody kind of step by step. You talk about Ali Watkins at the New York Times, you talk about this anonymous op-ed piece, and the overall, what seems very obvious to me, this pylon thing that's happening to basically hobble the Trump presidency. What can you tell us about all this, Zach?
I mean, we're really just seeing so much come to a head right now. You know, it's been a drip, 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 drip for so long now. And, you know, some people have been reading my writing for a while now, because I started right after the election, and I've basically been writing because of how corrupt the media is. No one is giving us the straight truth. Right. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. And, you know, everyone's just used to it by now, and seeing the midterm election cycle happening yet again, everyone's used to just this insane anti-Trump bias that's so belligerent. And I've said this on live streams before. It's just like, there need to be smart criticisms of the president. There shouldn't be delirious criticisms, because those get discounted. So it's just like, we're just seeing all of this come to a head right now as things are getting closer to the documents getting declassified that are really going to show people the undeniable truth of this massive, massive, massive scandal. And, you know, so the media is ramping up everything they can possibly do to try and keep people distracted from the disclosures that are coming, to keep people, you know, thinking that Trump is out of control and chaotic and racist and all these bad things. And, you know, I write because I have to think through all this, because it's such a complicated web. So much has been happening in the past 2 years. We've watched it in real time as the media has denied it in real time. So yeah, we can go through the article, and thanks for sharing and thanks for having me on here.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that you chose to publish this article on September 11th. Most of our focus was on the attacks here at the World Trade Center, which obviously remain uninvestigated, unanswered. And, you know, the thing I couldn't help but thinking about when I was reading your article, Zach, is that we are really seeing an unprecedented, delusional level of interference. And again, this is irrespective of what people think about Donald Trump as a man or think of Donald Trump as a president. It's like the guy can't do anything without getting hit from all sides. They're taking his business associates, they're busting into their houses, they're locking them in solitary confinement without due process, without trial, and people are applauding this type of behavior. We've got a special counsel investigation that, by the testimony from several legal experts, is completely illegal in its basis and unfounded. So I wonder, is it this mass desperation? Some of these people are the same people that were involved. You know, Robert Mueller was the FBI director during September 11th, 2001. So are they possibly working to cover something that might be related?
Absolutely. I mean, Yeah, there's been, so much going on. Obviously, the article touches on this, but basically the US government was co-opted by the deep state long ago. It's like everything, it's like it's hard to even find the right perspective on this, because it's like we're basically finding out this, like, how much everything is a scam between our government and the media and everything they've been telling us all this time, especially since September 11th, since 17 years ago on September 11th. And I think a lot 9/11 woke a lot of people up to the fact that something is very wrong. And I think that I was senior in high school. Like, I remember watching it and just being really incredulous and not really thinking too hard until later. But that narrative was just so impossible, seeing it happen, and everyone outside the United States knew exactly what was going on. They didn't have American media lying to them. So 9/11 really kind of shook a lot of people to their core. And it's very interesting because Donald Trump was one of the few people back then that was questioning the official narrative and working very hard to clean up in a way that was like, he was obviously investing some time and energy in rebuilding New York in a way that other politicians were just saying that they were, or trying to raise money off the concept that they should be. It's been this kind of like whole perverted, disaster capitalism since 9/11 in so many ways. So yeah, I wanted to release it on 9/11 just, as part of the, just kind of all of this more information that's coming against all of the scams that are unfolding. But I also kind of just have been meaning to write this article for a long time. And it was just clearly such an obvious 1-2 punch when the New York Times tried to pull that BS article about Oleg Desperaska, trying to like make it seem like it was like they were the good guys for trying to like clip him. Like, it's like completely, absolutely ridiculous. And then that anonymous op-ed, it was just like, okay, how desperate is the New York Times? What is going on that they have nothing to throw at him? And so this is what they're trying to do, is kind of trying to twist the Steele dossier narrative into something they can work with going forward, because they know they're going to have to, and just basically make it seem like Trump is being subverted from within with this anonymous op-ed from someone in Trump's administration, etc., while just using all of their anonymous sources constantly. It's just like, I don't think many people are really truly deceived by what these major newspapers write anymore. It's like, it's so obvious. The New York Times and Washington Post.
I think people are. I think people are still deceived. I mean, you're there in Seattle. I'm here in New York. You're dealing with, obviously, people who are open-minded to the concepts that you're writing about. And I think that those people aren't deceived. But they're doing these things because they still remain pretty effective to a large extent. And your article does go into some detail about the New York Times. Obviously, it seems super coordinated with this Bob Woodward book that the Times has has this anonymous op-ed. And I find it strange that they keep referring to the anonymous op-ed as an anonymous source. Now, there's a vast difference between journalistic investigations that rely on anonymous sources and op-ed opinion pieces that are expressing the opinion of an individual. I don't know that the New York Times has ever released an anonymous opinion piece, because that's just, I mean, look, if someone comes to you and says, hey, Zach, I think you're uniquely positioned to reveal my story, but I'm going to lose my job, I've got kids, family, whatever, keep me anonymous, but here's the information. You're now the journalist who stands by the integrity, say, look, I've met with this source, I've vetted this source, I'm protecting this source. That is vastly different than the New York Times coming out with an op-ed. Why didn't they take this person's information and make it an investigative report and put it out? Exactly.
It's just like, and I guess a lot of people are still kind of like duped by like the surface level, news. It's like every time I go to a coffee shop, there's like, I see the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times in particular. Every single headline on the page, pretty much every single day, is like twisted. Everything is like spun against Trump, against Trump, against Trump, against Trump. And so it's like, I guess some people still just like think there's like still a problem if they're too, unaware of really what's going on. They might be still getting duped, but I just really feel like it's so obvious by now. And, it's it's so weird too, because it's like, I think a lot of people just really have no idea how deep the corruption is, and so they're just not thinking that hard about the news, and so there's like, oh, Trump is still bad, oh, he's terrible, but they don't really pay attention to anything that's going on, so they don't know how deep this whole Spygate scandal goes.
And you've been on it from the beginning with Carter Page and the FISA stuff. So take us through the article here for people who haven't read it, because you're anticipating that the documents related to the FISA warrant are going to be declassified very soon.
Yeah, it seems like it. I mean, there's more and more coming out. So basically, I wanted to kind of start out just talking about this homogenization of opinion against Trump. We see it in the entertainment industry. We see it in establishment politics, both on the left and the right, Democrats and Republicans in D.C. Everyone hates Trump. He's been up against all of these people the entire time. Now, as we try to think about why is the media who's supposed to be unbiased, they're not even trying to be unbiased. They're trying to get everyone to hate Trump. And it's like, okay, well, why would they want that? You think about this and you're like, why is the media trying to deceive me? I mean, people have this curiosity to find the truth. If they're just hearing things, they want to look to the truth and research and find it. And so this, I tie back to the Operation Mockingbird program, because this is kind of when there was this first massive state infiltration of CIA in the mainstream media, basically, replacing all of the most reputable journalists on TV and in print to try and basically start manufacturing support for what the deep state wanted, to make people kind of comfortable with the idea that it would happen in some way, while using their own narrative to spin it in a way that didn't sound as completely awful and nefarious as it was. And this has just been getting worse and worse and worse over time. Americans have no idea what the CIA is telling state media partners to report to us. We have no idea where that gap is, what the CIA has quietly been telling the mainstream media throughout the entire Obama administration. Obama was so awful to the press in every possible way. Who knows what the CIA was even saying? We get to the point where right before the election this year, the WikiLeaks releases exposed this email, this Pied Piper memo, this I've been screaming about this. Most of us just know it happened, but a lot of people still don't even know this Pied Piper memo came out that exposed. It was this email from I don't know exactly who the email was to and from, but it was basically the Democrats informing their whole media circle that Hillary Clinton was going to be the nominee. I was furious because I still wanted Bernie Sanders to win at that point. And so this was our clearest proof that they rigged it for Hillary Clinton, and Bernie never even had a chance to begin with. And in this memo, it said, basically, we need to elevate Donald Trump as a Pied Piper and use all of our negative reporting against him to hurt him as a candidate and to protect Hillary Clinton from scrutiny. These two things are so important. Not only they're going after Trump and saying, you don't even need actual sources, you don't need anything, just throw as many kitchen sinks as you have at Donald Trump, make him look bad. That's our idiot strategy. These people are stupid. Well, that was their strategy for Trump, is just use disingenuous reporting and try and see if that works. But more importantly, we know how much crime we are committing. With Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they were obviously aware going into the primary that they had rigged the primary for Hillary Clinton. They had been making all of these horrible deals with, every worst possible dictator in the world, cash flowing in the Clinton Foundation. They knew that they would need a media strategy to specifically protect Hillary Clinton because how grave and how voluminous her crimes were. So this whole strategy memo has been in place for 2 years, and this is really why the mainstream media is so anti-Trump, is because basically Clinton Obama told them at that time that this was the strategy. Strategy hasn't changed. I mentioned in here too, after the election, we saw another leak of the David Brock anti-Trump playbook for once Trump was elected. Of course, they thought she would win, so they didn't think they would need this playbook. But when he won, they were like, okay, let's have this private Democratic Party media meeting, and we're going to figure out how we're going to attack Trump. It completely exposes that the Democrats have no interest in actually presenting policies or developing policies. Their interest is only going after Trump.
Now, let me pause you for a quick second. Let me pause you for a quick second, Zach, because one of the first things that you raised is very important to me. And actually, this is the reason I contacted you, because you highlighted that Operation Mockingbird, which a lot of people still don't know about. And you raised something in your article that I was totally unaware of. I thought that Operation Mockingbird came out during the church committee hearings, but you point out here that it was Carl Bernstein in 1977 who actually wrote an expose for Rolling Stone magazine, which in the 70s, of course, was the voice of rebellion. It was, you know,
Exactly.
a real cutting-edge source of journalism. Maybe not so much the case today, but Carl Bernstein, of course, was the partner of Bob Woodward, and if I'm not mistaken, they are famously no longer friends. And I found it really interesting because, you know, just the other day on the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp, one of the new shows we've been doing in our Only on Patreon series, Kevin points out that Bob Woodward has allegedly been a CIA asset for decades. So my question to you becomes, was Carl Bernstein aware of this? Do you know?
I mean, you know, I can't imagine they weren't. You know, it's like the people that were this high up in it, you know, you have to imagine like how many decades this organized crime precedes the actual events that are happening right now. You know, it's like obviously these cables have been in power for so long. This is just how it's acting out now. Obviously, there was so much, you know, there was just a really consistent transition for them through the Bush, Clinton, Obama administrations in terms of ramping up what they've been doing. You know, it seems like that just kind of took over. And, you know, again, I can't imagine any of these major players weren't, you know, in the meetings of the minds where these strategies were developed, or working with the consulting companies, or, you know, private, you know, intelligence firms. You know, all of these black operations, like I imagine most of these people. But is there
anything definitive in the Bernstein article from 1977 that says that he knows that Woodward was getting information from the CIA as part of Operation Mockingbird, driving the story about Watergate?
Good question. I should revisit that article.
We'll check that.
You know, yeah, because that's interesting. And, you know, it's, oh God, I wish Rolling Stone were still doing this hard-hitting journalism.
Right.
But
well, it's happening in places like Medium.com now. Independent people like yourself who aren't bound by some pre-existing relationship like Robert Mueller has with Oleg Deripaska. We've heard all these weird stories about how Deripaska funded some FBI $25 million secret mission to try to rescue Bob Levinson. What the hell is the FBI doing getting money from Russian oligarchs who we have heard are Russian mobsters? It seems super weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, back to the article. So please, carry on.
Sure. So, you know, part of what I like to do with my articles is I like to, like, you know, load them with links so people can kind of go down all these little rabbit holes on their own. The most important thing to me about Operation Mockingbird is knowing that it never was discontinued. And so to whatever extent that program is still happening actively, obviously the CIA, Obama CIA, Trump CIA, you know, there's transitions happening. But, you know, the work that the Clinton, Obama regime, as I like to call it, had to do before the election was to protect them both, because Obama was just as guilty as Clinton, obviously, if not more, because he was either, you know, organizing it himself. You know, sometimes I wonder, I'm like, of all the things we don't know, it's like, was this Obama's idea first or Clinton's idea first, or either of the two of them? You know, are they just like in these like round tables of, you know, evil people that, you know, who was the original idea to do XYZ of these different, you know, basically the entire Spygate operation, who were the main driving forces? But they needed to protect both of themselves, and so they're, you know, they consolidated the media going into the election. I'm kind of trying to read it as you go through here, and it's a lot of people in our, you know, in our audiences, because we all went through this together, know about Correct the Record, the David Brock organization, which hopefully is scared shitless now because of this new executive order that is threatening to put sanctions on any domestic or foreign interference in elections. So we're going to see U.S. companies and U.S. individuals who have, you know, dishonest media or political opposition, any campaign that's, you know, illegally operating to interfere with American democracy. Those groups, Media Matters, Correct the Record, they should be worried right now, which is great. It makes me feel a lot better.
When did that executive order come down, Zach?
A couple of days ago. I think it was maybe Wednesday of this week.
Wow.
But yeah. And wish I had more time to write, but if you read, I mean, I love reading Trump's executive orders because they are, they're written by the military, obviously, and it's like these military legal geniuses that like every single line is just like you can read between the lines. They're saying it in a way that still like respects the American political establishment while directly like subtweeting the deep state, subtweeting the people that we know are behind these operations. The EO from the executive order from, imposing sanctions on human rights abusers and corruption from last December, that one included the annex of list of individuals. So you could see on that executive order that Trump was executing it in good faith, because you could look at that list of 13 people and be like, yep, corrupt, Clinton's friends.
Wow.
You could see that this was being done in good faith. There was no immediate list of people sanctioned on this most recent EO, but we will start to see how this EO takes effect. I'm sure they already have evidence from fraud that's happened in primaries across the country already. And this basically throws everyone who was trying to make, devious plans to mess up the elections across the country for midterms. They're all on notice now. And so that's, really going to have a chilling effect on individuals on the ground that are knowing they're working for shady Democratic Party or Republican Party operations. And, there are these groups that have mostly been funded by George Soros, by Clinton, and the Democrats, David Brock. These are these groups, Correct the Record, Media Matters, that basically just operate to have online trolls, to have, ghost articles written to combat people like me. It's like there's so many articles that I see written by like a anonymous type dude that's like trying to be like, oh, I hate Trump on Medium. And I'm like, they literally have these, sock puppets, basically.
Yeah.
All of those organizations, everyone from the bottom to top of those organizations should be in a cold sweat because of this EO. Anything that they're doing that's illegal, obviously, they're the FISA court. Don't forget, Trump can use the FISA court now. It's like there's no place that anyone can hide. If they're conducting illegal operations now, if they're getting away with it now, it's probably because the Trump administration know it's happening and they're allowing it to continue to some extent to gather evidence that they'll have to really, put the nail in the coffin on these cases and hopefully on some of the people. But
right.
Yeah.
So have you been trolled online, Zach, for coming out with these types of articles?
It's an interesting thing, yeah. And so I'm writing a book, and my book is going to basically be, I think, 40 of my essays, and I'm going to write in between each of the essays, like what happened that prompted me to write that essay, what the backlash was that I got from that essay, because there are a lot of little things that I've done. Like when I got Ro Khanna to admit that the primary was rigged on Twitter, I was like, okay, that was cool. And all of these different little things that I've done, just from, being a loudmouth on Twitter and Medium. Mostly it was Twitter shadow banning for me and, seeing these Facebook situations where people try to retweet or share my articles on Facebook and it'll turn into a spam link or comments will just get magically deleted. Medium, they troll, people add trolling comments, but I can just delete and block them, so that's fun. And, it's like I welcome criticism of my articles, please. Good criticism, I would love to see it because it helps me get better. It's obviously clear when people's just trolling. It's just like saying, oh, you're white trash Trump supporter. I'm like, oh, nice critique of my article. You really tore me down with my arguments. Like, ah. So I get some, but I basically have no patience with the block button on Twitter and on Medium because I know how much, millions of dollars are being poured into the Correct the Record. They're going after people exactly like me. So it's like, I'm sure I can't wait for these documents when the Correct the Record and Media Matters, when all of these illegal plans like finally get leaked or get presented as part of trials. There's going to be like strategies that they have, like the Zach Haller strategies. Like, what do we do to tweet at Zach Haller? What do we say? Because whenever I put out an article that makes them mad, which is what I try to do every time, they basically, the Twitter sock puppets, they all have like the same 3 insults and they all have like the same 3 things that they pull back. Like there's this one tweet from when I was arguing with someone around Charlottesville. They took a few of my Charlottesville things to make me seem like a racist. That's when they found my Zach Haller's a racist. That's the trope that they found for my Charlottesville article, so that would magically pop up, and I'm like, oh, that's hilarious. You just magically have some Zach Haller tweets from the Charlottesville era on hand, ready to tell me I'm a racist, because that'll make my article not true anymore. Nice work. Like,
right.
That's the type of stuff that I saw. That's part of why I didn't dive into video, actually. I wanted to start doing more live streams and more videos, but I knew it would be so hard to keep the content alive because of how much video suppression and censorship there would be. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen your fair share. We see tons of, obviously high-profile people getting pulled off platforms now.
Well, right.
And so I didn't invest in video. I just was trying to invest my time in writing. So I'm like, I know my writing will always be able to stick no matter how much they censor me. It'll be able to be republished wherever. So most of the stuff that I saw was like Twitter trolling, Medium trolling, but you just block the people right away. It's amazing because it's like, okay, these people are literally getting paid to troll you. So if you immediately block them from that account, that screws them up and they have to start over and create another account. So it's like you can immediately waste their time and waste their money just by blocking them as soon as you can tell they're a troll. So I don't see too much.
Well, it's interesting what you've observed about the video trolling, because blocking someone on Twitter really blocks them. They can't tag you in comments, they can't see your tweets, you don't see them. It's like they're in a different Twitter universe. But oddly on YouTube, even when you block people, they can still watch your videos, they can still comment. I don't understand what blocking on YouTube does. As a matter of fact, I think YouTube is deliberately allowing people to engage in this type of troll-like behavior, and I'm glad you're talking about Media Matters. That was another reason why I wanted to have you on, because Media Matters, it's one of these things, we've sort of heard about it now, but whether it's online trolling or paying off someone or whatever it is that they might do, it's never David Brock or Barack Obama or whoever handing cash to the person, because that would implicate them. They want to have these little compartmentalized kind of sub-entities that can pay another entity. They've got Perkins Coie paying Fusion GPS, paying Christopher Steele. So it becomes a little bit of an investigation just to figure out who's behind all this stuff. So while I think Media Matters is important, there are an unknown number of these little troll factories where, we had Michael Barden on just yesterday talking about gang stalking. I think we are looking straight at this sort of new generation of online gang stalking that's either happening on Twitter or YouTube. And as you've said, Alex Jones and the people who have broken through and are making a difference, they're taking more extreme measures against. I mean, that's the primary reason why we've been moving content to patreon.com, because as you said, even if you can block the person or make it cost $1 to join rather than free to make a sock puppet account, these things throw off their methods and keep them having to adapt and change what they're doing.
Yep.
So, yes, back to the article here.
Sure. I think that there's really going to be a real slowdown of Correct the Record and these other groups because of all the, constraints that Trump is putting between the EO and now this. I was so relieved when I saw that the Department of Justice is going to start probing the social media companies for their discriminatory practices. A lot more people are going to just be quitting their jobs because, it's like we've seen all these people quitting already. People are going to be like, nope, it's not worth the risk for me anymore. Like, I knew what we were doing was shady, and now they're literally going after it. So I need to get out as soon as possible. So we're going to see a lot of attrition that's helping kind of eliminate some of the corruption, in different places. But the crux of my article is these Catch-22s, and it's been just hilarious to me ever since this Russian collusion, concept came out years ago. If anyone, when the Podesta emails came out, and that's when I got most of my Twitter followers, because literally every day on the bus I would just be like, oh my God, and I'd be reading them as fast as possible and tweeting observations. And one of the things that we saw in the WikiLeaks emails from John Podesta was an email that said, use the Russia stuff against Trump, it makes him look bad. And so they literally have been saying that, just use Russia against Trump this whole time as part of their platform. And that in the Shattered book about Hillary Clinton's election loss, they say that John Podesta and Robbie Mook, the Clinton campaign managers, literally engineered the argument that Russian hackers were to blame. It literally says that point blank. And the candidate, the Clinton campaign has never denied it. Podesta has confirmed those are his emails. So it's like, we know that this has been going on this entire time. And it's just so ridiculous because, I think smart people who like debates like to see good, smart debates. And so you want like people to be really on their game. You want them to be telling the truth. When you see reporters, you want them to be telling the truth. And so when we see reporters that all of a sudden were saying collusion with Russia is bad, I was like, oh, great. Does that mean we're looking at uranium-1 finally? Oh, no, wait, Trump colluded with Russia? Wait, what? Like, in the private sector? In what possible way? So it's like as soon as the Russiagate stuff started happening, both Clinton and Obama, no matter what, if you were hearing about the Russian collusion being a thing for Clinton or Obama, there was literally a catch-22 exactly. If you were trying to throw Trump under the bus for colluding with Russia, you have to look to Clinton for what she did, and obviously the uranium-1 scandal is the biggest ongoing scandal with what they've been doing. But they've been, working behind closed doors with Putin for, long before the uranium-1 scandal. But then also because obviously Obama allowed Clinton to do all of this, people are like, oh, Russian collusion, the Russians interfered with our election. And this is always the Obama cultists that are saying this. They're like, Trump is terrible and he colluded with the Russians to win. And it's like, okay, so you're throwing your favorite president under the bus and saying he wasn't capable of addressing the most important national security risk that you're so freaked out about right now? How did he fail that desperately? You want me to think that Obama, after having failed that bigly, you want me to vote for who Obama is recommending? He just failed. Why would I trust his judgment? It's like these just blatantly obvious catch-22s that only the media can say it, and they post it in their article in the Times, or they post it on their, they say it on their newscasts because they just can say it without having anyone be like, that was bullshit. Wait, wait, back that up. Bullshit and radar going off here. It's like they're the only ones that can get away with it just saying it, and it just really exposes that they're only focusing on one side and saying that Trump is bad, and it just exposes their bias clear as day. And I've been wanting to write this article because it really undoes anyone's argument whenever they are saying, oh, Russian collusion is bad because of Trump. You're just like, okay, so here's the first logical question I'm going to ask you after that. Whether it's Clinton or Obama, both have these catch-22s here that you can't condemn Trump for Russian collusion without having to admit that Clinton and Obama were both implicated worse than Trump if you're going to actually look at what we have documentary evidence of in terms of corruption, paper trail of the bribery kickbacks that were going back and forth between Russia and Clinton through the foundation, all through Obama's off term. It's like Trump, it's so ridiculous how people even compare Trump and Clinton apples to oranges, because Clinton's been corrupt in government for decades, literally decades. Trump has never been in politics until he became president. So it's like, good luck trying to tell me how much he's influenced public policy from the private sector. You think Trump has had any comparison in terms of Clinton to how much he's actually worked to create the society that we're in today? It's like, no, Trump's been building hotels and having parties. So
I want to share one other thing with you, Zach, that I think you'll find useful, possibly in future articles, or you're doing a great job pointing out some of the logic conflicts that people are openly embracing. But the Office of the Special Counsel has to adhere to strict rules, and I'm not a lawyer, of course. I'm paraphrasing things that lawyers have told me, but collusion is not a crime. There's no 18 USC, code that says collusion. So there's been no specific allegation of a crime against Donald Trump. And the way the Special Counsel's office is supposed to operate is there's a suspicion of a crime, there's evidence of a crime, and they investigate that crime. What they're doing right now is they've come up with something that's not specifically a crime, and they're just investigating everybody that Donald Trump knows, putting the full pressure of the Department of Justice on anyone, which I think there's all kinds of people who say, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. I mean, you want to go back and say, oh, wait a minute, this guy didn't pay his parking ticket, he did this wrong with his taxes, he has this company that was set up wrong. I mean, for them to be, in the case of Michael Moore, Thomas Paine of True Pundit, we're hearing about how FBI agents broke open his door and held guns to his kids over $40,000 worth of non-violent business transactions of an alleged copyright theft. Now, why are they breaking in someone's door and prosecuting someone for $40,000 worth of criminal activity, but there's been no prosecution of the Clintons. There have been no prosecution of other crimes that there's ample evidence of. So the special counsel's investigation into all of these guys associated with President Trump seems more like a real pressure tactic to just be able to publish an article that says, oh, Trump's lawyer, you know, guilty of paying a porno star. It's crazy.
Yep. And they tie, you know, it's like you can see the tentacles connecting to all like the Democratic Party campaigning that's going on right now for midterms also. And I think, you know, the socialist in New York is kind of the most clear, obvious of where all of the George Soros money is getting poured into. But you see this in other places and other ways too, where there's just this like seamless narrative between the anti-Trump narrative and the now socialism is the new thing. I actually, on a random note, am very surprised to see how much the corporate Democrat, now we call it the Mick Revolution, how they basically like turned Bernie Sanders' revolution into the new Democratic kind of, you know, zeitgeist, like why we're cool, why we're still a party. They are basically like openly embracing communism, and it's like really shocking. And, you know, they just are really opening so many, you know, socialism, communism, they're opening so many more doors into this type of like campaigning that it's really shocked me. I thought that they would stay more strictly in the Hillary Clinton centrism versus the Bernie Sanders, you know, kind of way. But, you know, Obama obviously had nothing to say about Bernie Sanders the entire time. And now Obama's like acting like Bernie Sanders was the same, you know, or Bernie Sanders is the savior of the party still. I mean, everything's falling apart, fortunately, so they're not able to get out and do these big campaigns. Michelle Obama has her campaign coming, or her book coming out too, which will be interesting to see how she tries to spin what's going on.
I think they're going to run her for president, if not
they probably will, yeah.
Certainly 2020, 24.
Yeah, if she's not locked up by then.
Well, I mean, the thing is, if you want to defeat Donald Trump, the most logical thing in my mind is the opposite of Donald Trump. And what could be more opposite than an old white guy than a younger black woman? But you raise an interesting point about Bernie Sanders, and I want to bounce something off of you, because I was also a Bernie Sanders supporter during the election prior to voting for Donald Trump, prior to supporting Donald Trump as the president. And since then, I've come to consider the possibility that Bernie wasn't robbed. I think that Bernie was forced into a position, whether he wanted to or not, but to play a role in this gigantic charade. Because it just seems to me, if Bernie got so many votes and was so popular, why wouldn't Hillary reconfigure her strategy midstream and say, you know what, Bernie's going to be the vice president, and I'm going to run with Bernie on the ticket. That would have taken all the Bernie momentum with her and her campaign, and it would have satisfied the Bernie voters that he's at least part of the presidential team, but she just left him on the side of the road like roadkill. I think that Bernie was intended to, you know, galvanize the support of the millennials, the younger generation, to introduce some of these, you know, socialist type ideas to people, to embrace that, and to now shift that momentum towards the Democrats. And not, you know, Bernie could have shut down Hillary Clinton that night. He said, forget about your damn emails. If he had said, no, listen, this is very serious, private server. He could have said anything like that, but he basically just threw in the white towel. We've also learned that Bernie Sanders was made aware that both Boeing and General Electric had these emails from Hillary Clinton's State Department about pay for play. He knew that. He said nothing about it. Yeah, and you know, that's something that I feel like we'll be able to dig into a little bit more after all of this current crisis is a little bit more under wraps. Yeah. Because it is really interesting to think back and try and imagine what exactly Bernie Sanders' like will was and what he was forced to do and how much he did it just to like play the role. Because he has always been, you know, before this election, he had always been a thorn in the side of both the establishments. People hated him because of all the things that he was trying to get across. And yes, his policies were socialist in general, and, you know, democratic socialism was kind of the concept. It was just, you know, it was a little bit more pragmatic back then, saying like, look, we need to move toward this type of policy, not saying socialism is what this country needs, which is like what we're seeing more now. So I don't really know. I think it seemed to me that Bernie wanted to try and run. Like, he thought for a second, like, you know what, I might actually be able to beat Clinton. I don't know, but I might. And I
to me, when he ran, I felt like he actually did think that at least he could give it a try, even if he got stomped out by Clinton. He knew that that would be beneficial to American society to see Hillary Clinton stomp his presidency out, because that would help people wake up to the fact that Hillary Clinton needed to be stopped at all costs. So I thought that Bernie Sanders had good intentions at the beginning going in. Now, in hindsight, it looks like he was really aware of this much of the time, but they still treated him like dirt the entire election. It was very hostile toward him and his supporters. So it's like, if they wanted him as part of the plan, I think that they would have been a little bit more respectful of the Bernie Sanders voters and being like, you guys can be different, but just like be Democrats. Like, they were really hostile.
That's consistent with how they always are. They have to treat him like the opponent. I mean, I don't know. This is speculation, of course, on my part. But let me ask you something else. I want to shift gears because I know Bernie Sanders is a topic that you're very interested in, as I am, but also WikiLeaks. And WikiLeaks was very crucial in revealing information that was totally damaging to the Democrats and Hillary Clinton's run. And, of course, just really right in close proximity to the midterm election, we've got this guy who is part of WikiLeaks. What was he doing for WikiLeaks, this individual? He's missing. So many people from WikiLeaks have gone missing, turned up dead.
Yeah. I don't remember what his role was in particular. It's so sad how many people with WikiLeaks are having the same fate. I haven't looked into his background specifically.
He was a cybersecurity expert, and he was linked to WikiLeaks, and he was just found, you know, his kayak was floating there, and his phone was in it, and it's similar to the way William Colby died with this empty kayak. So there's all these conveniently timed deaths. Certainly if WikiLeaks has anything that they're ready to release that might harm the Democrats in the midterm election, this is possibly sending a message to them.
Yeah, it's, you know, they have had so many people targeted for, you know, at WikiLeaks for, you know, for any number of reasons. You know, it's so tragic how, you know, it's basically like, you know, if they turn up missing or they die, it's like, okay, so they were clearly onto something. What was it that they were researching? What was it that got the target on their back for that moment that they actually found the person and carried it out? And yeah, they are all like uncomfortably similar, how, you know, how the deaths happen, how they're reported. And, you know, I think that there is really, it's like the dam is breaking and they're doing anything they can to basically stymie the flow of information that's going to be leaked or going to be declassified. There's so much coming out that Lord knows what individual element was, you know, the breaking point in this situation. I don't get into all of these. It's so sad how many people have died that have been involved in either whistleblowing operations or involved in corruption operations, particularly related to the Clintons. It's like so unnerving to think about, and it's so sad.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Well,
but,
it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. I mean, just this tweet right here and the subsequent commentary on it is saying that this guy was a cybersecurity expert who had written an article about information security for journalists. So here's a friend or associate of his who's annoyed that he's being so closely tied to WikiLeaks. But to tell you the truth, writing this information security for journalists in general actually makes it even more curious, because he's not just linked to WikiLeaks, he's helping all journalists. So this is something that you or I or anyone could potentially benefit from. And if he's helping lots of people get information out that could be damaging to the deep state, that doesn't make me think it's less likely that his disappearance was not a coincidence. Yeah, I remember this now. I did read about this a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, I really just do feel like we are at war, and it's like the people who are advancing, you know, who are exposing the corruption, you know, it's like so many of them were silenced in in various ways under the Obama administration, and now the deep state obviously still has these types of operations going on just for damage control, and it's, you know, it's scary.
I don't, you and I probably both have had our own panics, but it's just like, that's partly why I just like to write and just like to observe what's out there. Cause it's like, it's a very scary time to be a journalist who's actually moving the needle right now, because the ones who are on the track, right over target with what they're investigating, this ends up happening to so many of them. And it's just like,
right.
It's overwhelming to think about.
A lot of pushback happening for sure. So this was one of your more popular articles, wasn't it?
It didn't get as, I think it's still going to have some staying power. And it wasn't about a certain event. So I don't think that like people kind of quite realized what all I was saying in this. So it hasn't gotten, I have a couple that got like a lot of views, like, over 100,000 one time,
wow.
and 40, 50,000 on a couple. This one's, I think, around 5,000 views so far, so I'm like, share my stats.
Wow, so it's
but
low.
it did get a lot of traction on Twitter too, and a lot of, I get so, I'm so proud when like smart people share my articles. I'm like, yes, smart person shared it. That means it was a good article.
That's what I was looking at. Sorry, I didn't strictly review the numbers, but it's like Rex.
The feedback was
what is Rex's name? Who was retweeting it?
Imperator X. Yeah, right. He's, in my opinion, one of like the top 3, if not the number 1, like smartest analyst on at least Twitter right now. Twitter is where I get most of my information. He's like the absolute smartest. He shared my Saudi Arabia, when the Saudi arrests happened, he shared that article of mine, and I was like so honored because that was such a crazy event. And I was sitting right here when I wrote that. I'll never forget when it happened. I was just like, oh my God, I have to write this down. And then he shared it. So he's been sharing a couple of my articles since then. And he finally follows me now, so I can actually DM him my articles now.
That's great.
Yeah, he follows 112 people, and I'm like, oh my God, It's such an honor to be followed by him. So so it did get really good reviews, and I'm going to put this all into a book, and I think, hopefully if it doesn't get burnt by Amazon and all the other companies that don't want my writing anywhere, hopefully people will have this as a resource over time, because, there's not, there are a lot of good journalists right now that are investigating the fraud and breaking news in terms of what exactly were the intricate details of this whole coup against the president. However, there aren't very many people that are stepping back and being like, okay, here's the big picture. That's what's going on and what's been going on the past few years. So that's kind of how I try to do it, is to, write in a way that is explainable to anyone, and, to be as shareable as possible in terms of, this is information that we need to know to be an informed electorate. You can't just look at what's happening today without understanding how it's gotten to this point. I do the best I can. Obviously, I wish I had, more time and studies in my past, that I had even more ability to write and higher volume. But once my book gets out, that'll be, I think, a good thing, and people will kind of see the timeline of my articles as all this stuff has been happening, obviously in real time. It's funny. I sometimes think I kind of want to, maybe I'll have me on a show, and I can talk about my whole experience starting writing for the internet revolution. Because I really just I started tweeting on the bus about Bernie Sanders when I was riding to work during the election to help Bernie win to help Bernie in the primary and to help take down Clinton in the primary. And that's just how I started writing.
It's a good story.
Once the election happened, I was like, all right, well, a lot of people had told me, writing is the best thing you can do to, build your career and to, grow an audience, etc. So I was like, all right, Medium came out. I really liked the Medium platform. And so I actually started writing. A lot of people who've been following me know this, but I started writing for Jordan Chariton with Truth Against the Machine, the little Young Turks spinoff right after the election that they were basically using to probably monitor people like me. But I started writing for that, but then Jordan started deleting my articles, and I'm like, well, I'm on to something when Jordan's kicking me out, and the Young Turks are making sure that Zach is degraded by Jordan in front of everyone on his fucking. Anyway, so I started writing for these ridiculous reasons, and I'm excited to write the book and kind of explain what led me to write each article, what the response was, because one of my articles was quoted in Newsweek. Well, not quoted, was referenced in Newsweek when I wrote about the Tarmac Gate, when Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch, when that media cover-up was exposed. I wrote about that, and that got tons of views. And I made it very resourceful. I had all my information about the Clinton email investigation, Comey, Lynch, like all of the backstory, so everyone has all of their resources. And Newsweek had to, of course, to say, this was where Newsweek said, conservative blogger Zach Haller, and I was just like dying laughing when I saw that. I was like, I'm literally a conservative blogger to Newsweek. This is the most hilarious thing I've ever heard. And so I tweeted at the author of the article, like just laughing my ass off, being like, oh my God, how you don't clearly know anything about me if you're calling me a conservative blogger. And then he DM'd me, but I wasn't on the internet for a while. So he updated it without me being able to like identify as how I would be described, but he described me as a media personality critical of Hillary Clinton. I was like, oh my God, I have made it. That's actually accurate what I am, is a media personality critical of Hillary Clinton. That is my claim to fame in life. And,
it's better than being a guy tweeting on the bus about Bernie Sanders, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's crazy how the internet has like given just like creators, like average people, content opportunities. And obviously there's a lot of shadow banning and stuff like that, but Twitter does really keep tweets and thoughts and ideas alive, and you never know when someone random stumbles upon an old tweet and retweets it, and then it gets a ton of new life. And I try to write all my articles so that they'll be good forever. I always want them to age well. And so I, really do try and make sure I have enough time to see enough perspective to write about whatever I'm writing on. Some of them, obviously, I just like to be funny and use humor as a way to make a point. But in terms of, my DNC fraud lawsuit reporting and basically kind of my media analysis, I'm kind of rambling, I guess, but I'm excited to write this book and to fill in all these gaps in between it, because people who have followed me and us, and how the Citizens media has kind of built up in the past few years, a lot of people have seen me over time, and there's so much that I just don't tell people. I mean, so much happens to me, and you and I, and we meet so many interesting people that are connected to these media operations in particular, but also in politics. It's like, there's so many little stories that I have that I've just never been able to say, because I'm not I use gossip intelligently. Obviously, I it's all part of trying to just keep my brand a certain way online, so people are more likely to know who I am and know what my shtick is and read my stuff. But obviously, it's a lot an act, and the way that I've gotten people to respond, I trigger people, and just it's really telling. And so I'm excited to fill in the gaps and for this book to come out, because a lot of people that have been reading my articles as they've come out, they'll get to hear why I wrote it and what happened and what the fallout was. And I'm trying to figure out exactly how much juice to divulge, because a lot has happened. And as you know, my dear friend Chris, the Twitter user Actual Flaticus, who we lost last fall, the 1-year anniversary of his death is coming up next month. And so maybe actually, I don't know if you'll be around, but I am hopefully going to have my article that I've not been able to publish since we lost him, because I've been waiting and trying to make sure I have enough information to write a, ethical story about what happened. But that, hopefully I'll be able to finish that as the last article in my book. And yeah, he died on October 8th last year, so that's coming up. And it's so weird, because a lot of you, I'm sure, know his Twitter. He was just an icon on the revolution at that time. And people who follow me know that he and I became close through tweeting, and he was a lawyer and I'm paralegal, and so when I was doing my DNC fraud lawsuit reporting, I was talking to him and Jared Beck, but both of them a lot about all of these legal intricacies of fraud and the different, legal elements that I was doing as I was reporting on the DNC fraud lawsuit. So he helped me write so many of when I first started as a writer, he started helping me with everything, and was my information resource that made me confident that I could actually publish knowing that I wasn't making a huge error in legal knowledge or in, court procedure, civil procedure. And so I still I still feel like I write with him because I just feel that way. But there's just, I can tell that story a bit more when I finally get this book done. And there's just, everything that we're doing, you and I and so many of us, like, not only are we doing the reporting and sharing the information and trying to just build a community based off the information sharing, but everything that we do has its equal and opposite reaction in the media war. And whether it's one article or one video that, really prompts a certain response or not, the first war, I've said this the whole time, the first war is the media war. And look at the people who are actually throwing rocks at the mainstream media with, adversarial journalism. That's the journalism that's missing now. There's no adversarial journalism in the mainstream anymore because of how it was co-opted. So we're the ones, the citizens are the ones that have to do the adversarial journalism. And so just being able to tell the story of how you wrote the article or made the video or did the research and its response from the mainstream, establishment online, it shows the state of the media war and what they're doing, working against people who are sharing content that's critical of or exposing of the media manipulation operations that are going on to try and censor us, silence us, and advance the political agendas.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Zach. It's really, I think people are going to be very interested to read that book. So when do you think that will be out?
I'm hoping it's going to be out for the holidays this year. My goal, so I have 2 more articles, 2 or 3, I can't decide, 2 or 3 articles that I want to finish before I finish the book, and then they'll basically be, it'll probably be 40 of my articles, and then, probably another maybe 10 to 20 pages of story in between about how I wrote the article, what happened because of the article, and I'll tie in all of my media appearances on Crosstalk, Russia Today, and, obviously, your videos, our conversations have helped my articles, take life after them. And so I'll get to talk about more of that stuff. So, Chris always said, and I always remind myself, I can't rush it and I need to make sure I do a good job. And I think of it as like baking the cake. Like you have to leave the cake in the oven for a long time to make sure it's really done. Right. So I can't promise it'll be done by the holidays, but my goal is to have it finished by November 1st so I can have it in an ebook form for people to give to presents to their unaware friends and family members for the holidays this year.
Well, people should definitely watch your Twitter page, and you'll have news about the book, I'm sure, there. Yeah. People who aren't currently following Zach, he's the Shirtless Pundit on Twitter, and you can find him at Zach Haller, H-A-L-L-E-R. Zach, we're running out of time, but before we close for today, I just wanted to bring you back to one last point in your Medium article here about Rod Rosenstein. What do you expect to see happen with the Deputy Attorney General in the coming days and weeks?
Really great question. He's kind of my biggest question mark because he seems like he has been cooperating with Sessions on this, and in some way it seems like the only way that he could still be around and have not been fired like Comey was or McCabe, it seems like the only way he could still be around is if he is to some extent working on the bust of the, basically pulling the rug out from under the Mueller investigation and the Spygate FISA court Inspector General probes. I can't imagine that Rosenstein hasn't somewhat kind of already given, some testimony and been, allowed to stay to some extent. So, but I don't, I think that he may be working still kind of behind the scenes. So he may need to go, whether it's they wait till the documents are declassified and it's allowed to show what he has done. That seems more likely now than him getting fired, in my opinion. But at the same time, I think that we're going to start to see a lot happening between now and midterms, and also everything that needs to happen before midterms needs to happen within the next week or two. Otherwise, any of this type of, a lot of these court cases and things like that, the judges are respectful of election season, and so sometimes they'll say, we can't hold this trial until after the election because we don't want the results of this to affect the election. Obviously, that's not necessarily done in good faith, but the things that are going to happen, the big movements that are going to happen, maybe with Rosenstein being exposed, those probably will happen very soon or not until after the election. So I think that there's a lot of operations going on right now that we are going to start learning about. I think that these FISA documents are going to start getting declassified, but they are also really advancing a lot of these Lisa Page, Peter Strzok text messages that are showing the media leak operation. And so I think that they might start changing the focus onto the media leak operation as a little bit more of a palatable crime to introduce to the public, to start to understand not only were these people corrupt, but whether you like their politics or not, it's pretty much indisputable that leaking classified information to the press is a crime. It should be a crime, no matter whose administration it happened under.
It's absolutely a crime. And I think, I don't know if you've looked at this at all, but if you get a chance in your upcoming writing, take a look at James Comey's relationship with Ben Wittes of the Lawfare blog. There's been leaking going on there as well. And Larry Klayman was victorious in a FOIA lawsuit against the special counsel's office on this very matter. So people can go to medium.com and search for Zach Haller. Haller. I always screw that up. H-A-L-L-E-R. So if you were thinking Haller, you're going to find my friend Zach. But people should read the article. It's very informative. Zach has tons of great articles on there. You can follow him on Medium. It's totally free. You can follow him on Twitter, of course, and Zach's got a book coming out. You're doing fantastic work, Zach. I really enjoy your writing style, and you're digging into areas that so many people shy away from. Thanks for joining me here today. I hope you have a great weekend, and definitely want to get you back on soon.
Thanks, Jason. Always happy to chat. Thanks for having me.
Bye, Any other websites you'd like people to visit where you can be found?
I think the Medium is the best thing. That's, people who like to read stuff that I like to write, that's where I think, build my audience most consistently. And then I'll probably have a website for the book when the book comes out. So I'll have a separate website and maybe a mailing list for that.
People will be looking for that for sure. And we'll definitely have you back on when the book is out. Thanks, Zach. Great speaking with you. And thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you tomorrow, 3 o'clock, Sunday with Charles.